Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sermon. I'm Mat Hotho, the Director of Production and Online Engagement.
And I'm Magrey, deVega, the Senior Pastor.
So last week, if you watched Beyond the Sermon, you saw Magrey and I get a little silly because we were talking about the emotion of joy and exploring Holy Humor Sunday, looking at some memes together. But this week, we're really going to actually dive into the topic of this series, which is our emotions. Yeah. So Magrey, to kind of open the door, what were you taught about emotions growing up? How to express them, how to feel them?
If not verbally, through the example of adults like my family, that emotions were something to be controlled, not to be let out, not to be expressed. In fact, I learned from the negative example of a number of adults in my life who just let emotions loose and realized, at least subconsciously, the destructive, harmful nature of emotions that were not expressed in a healthy way. And so the pendulum swung the other way for me, which is to try to master them, control them, to bridle them. And that, it was a hard lesson in adolescence and early adulthood, that's not always, in fact, that's usually not a good approach.
Yeah, and I think the word we'd use for that would be stoicism.
True, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Just this idea that, especially as a man, that we shouldn't express our emotions,
right.
That there's something weak about that even.
Right, an unhealthy sense of stoicism. There are virtues to stoicism for sure, which is to remember what you can control, release what you can't. But even stoicism to an extreme, an unhealthy sense of stoicism, means you're not allowed to feel anything. Mm-hmm. And that's not only counterproductive to your psyche, it's unnatural.
Yeah.
As I've said a few times now in this series, emotions in and of themselves are value neutral and they are healthy. They are a product of our human evolution. They help us survive. They help us to create social networks. They help us to create organizational structures that allow communities to thrive and survive. All of this because of our capacity to feel things. What were you taught, either subconsciously or outrightly, about how to handle your emotions as a kid?
Yeah, so I remember that whenever my dad would have a really tough conversation with us, like he would cry, but it didn't feel like it was. It almost felt like, oh my gosh, Dad's crying.
Okay.
Like kind of like that vibe of like, oh no, this is serious. Like, Dad's crying kind of thing. And he never really talked about, oh, I cried because I was afraid or I was sad or anything like that. So I just associated that with, okay, I'm feeling something really serious. And I think I would, I cried quite a bit, know, and especially when there would be tough changes in my life. I felt a lot of sadness and fear and also this third emotion that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, anxiety,
right,
that I've really started to understand more as I've gotten older and gone into counseling and that kind of stuff. But I think sadness and fear interplayed a lot in my life where the sadness and fear would almost be rooted more in like a guilt.
Yeah.
Where I would think, okay, I did something wrong and now I'm sad about that, or I'm fearful of the consequences, which is now making me sad.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because if you live the path that I lived for a while in young adulthood, which was to bottle it all up, the first time you can't bottle it all up and it comes out is frightening.
Yes.
I just remember myself thinking, what am I doing with this eruption of emotions? What is this feeling? And then it becomes even worse because it gets compounded with guilt and shame and a whole bunch of other stuff. I will say that one of the indelible core memories for me involved a different portrayal of emotions in one of my friends. He was a soccer player on our team. We went to the state finals. We were all cheering the team on. We lost. And he just burst out in tears. And as he was walking across the field to all of us in the stands, the first people to meet him were his parents. He buried his head in his mother's arms as he was just blubbering. And I'll never forget what his mother said to him, "I am proud of your tears," which was something I had never heard from any adult in my life, never told myself that. And so that was something I pondered in the moment, and apparently it still stayed with me, that one could actually be proud of the expression of one's emotions was a novel thing.
Yeah.
And so I've held on to that to say, and so I think my daughters could verify this or deny it, that I think I've said the same thing to them, really as a way of saying it to myself.
Yeah, and to hear that as a young man, I mean,
right.
Wow.
Right.
Like to connect pride with that emotion, emotional state is really beautiful. And I just got goosebumps for a second because I was remembering a scene in the second season of Ted Lasso.
Okay.
Where where Jamie Tartt's dad blows up at him after a loss, right? Yeah. And starts screaming at him and berating him and then gets dragged out of the room. and the whole soccer club is just staying there waiting for something.
Right.
And Roy Kent walks up to Jamie and gives him a hug, and
Right.
Jamie just starts bawling.
Right. Both of our illustrations have to do with soccer and masculinity.
Yeah.
Maybe that shows you the slant to our perspective. This is a more universal thing that we're talking about, the need to express emotions in a healthy way. But there is something to be said about a healthy sense of masculinity when it comes to all of these topics that we're covering.
Yeah. So let's touch on this other topic that kind of flirted around for a second, anxiety.
Yeah.
I know we'll be getting to that in 2 weeks.
With the youth.
It'll be Youth Sunday, actually. So
Right.
a youth will be
Right.
preaching on anxiety, which I think couldn't be
Right.
more appropriate.
Right.
But what's been your journey with anxiety and the odd relationship that it might have to fear and sadness?
Yeah, well, it's anxiety, like many of us, is something that I've carried in some form or another throughout all my life. It has prompted me to do my own inner work. Fortunately, I've been blessed with support structures, in some case therapists, to go into that really hard place when it comes to anxiety. It doesn't always have to be clinical anxiety in order to confront the anxiousness that we feel within us. In some ways, we should just name the fact that anxiety in and of itself is also value neutral. Even though the Bible, both in the Gospels and the epistles, talk about anxiety as something to be handled, like be anxious for nothing, is what Paul says. Or why do you worry, Jesus says. Consider the lilies and the sparrows, those kinds of texts, which in our blush interpretation, we might think anxiety is not something that Jesus wants us to feel or Paul wants us to feel. What we know from the psychotherapeutic world is anxiety is a healthy emotion that when handled well, expressed well, can actually strengthen us, give us stamina for the long haul. And so that's the important question for us, is not whether or not to feel anxious. As Erica Clark said in the illustration that I shared in the sermon, it's our ability to name it, our ability to do something with it, and, as I said in the sermon, our ability to hold on to those 3 guarantees. Regardless of how anxious we feel, someone in our lives deeply loves us. Regardless of how anxious we feel, we still have agency and capacity to do something proactively to help someone else, to help ourselves, to help the world. And sometimes the best way to deal with anxiety is to just open our eyes to the wondrous possibility of the simple things in every present moment. That's been revolutionary for me in terms of my work with my therapist. Sometimes I just need to open my eyes a little more widely in order to cherish the simple things, the wondrous simple things in life.
Yeah, I think on that the second and third part, obviously we should have someone who deeply loves us, and just believe that. Like that's sort of more of a belief thing.
That's right.
The second one, I've definitely found that in my own life when I'm feeling anxious or fearful. I want to go serve somebody, or I want to either cook dinner, right? It could be as simple as, hey, tonight I just want to cook dinner because I want to do something with my hands that will make a difference for the world.
It could be just that.
Yeah, other times it might be like, hey, I want to go into the gym and coach. And I just want to be around people, but sort of in a group management, class leading kind of way, because that's sort of a natural thing for me, and it's a way to make a difference, right? And it kind of allays my fears and anxieties. But to that third one about connecting with the wonder around you, have you ever used that technique of what are 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can smell?
Well, probably have, but I'd love a reminder.
Yeah, I'm probably butchering it, but it's kind of this idea of when you're feeling anxious, to ground yourself in the present moment, look around you, and what are 5 things that you see?
Okay.
What are 4 things that you can touch? What are 3 things you hear? You activate all your senses. Right. Again, I'm butchering this. Someone go look it up to get it more correct. But that's the general idea. It's a sensory exercise, right? The other one that may be even simpler, if you don't want to think about it that hard, is go look for something around you that's a piece of text and just read it or spell it to yourself backwards.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
What does that do?
It just grounds you in the present moment.
I love
and
that.
turns your brain off from the anxiety that you're feeling.
I love that.
And just forces you to focus on something in your surroundings.
One of the ways I've heard that described is to stay in your body.
Yeah.
Which seems like a cliche thing to consider, but there is, as I said in the sermon, there is a wonder about just your body, which is yours and yours alone. And so the simple act of engaging the senses like you're talking about, or feeling the sensation of sitting, or the sensation of breathing in and breathing out, when you think about it consciously, it's just a wonder that you get to occupy this privileged thing you call your body, which is yours and yours alone. So, the whole idea, you appreciate this, of working out, of doing CrossFit, for me, of running in the morning, is just a way of staying in your body. And again, you doing something with your body is something you control, regardless of what else is happening all around you. Wiggling your fingers, listening for the sounds, as you're talking about, focusing on 5 things is something you can control in a wondrous way that no one else can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So as we give these techniques, another thing that you might want to do is attend our Decoding Your Emotions workshop, which, if you're listening to this in the next 2 weeks or so, is going to be on May 13th at 6:30 p.m. here on site, actually in this room, the Harnish Center, and online. So you can find out more about that on our website. And while at that event, Dr. Erica Clark will be there, who's a licensed psychotherapist, I think, right?
She'll be so much wiser than either of us on this stuff.
She will have much better techniques and actually get them right.
I hope we keep that in the video.
Yeah, we're like the Craigslist of self-help. So go to that event if you really want to know how to take care of yourself better. But honestly, thanks for being a part of this conversation today. For future conversations, we're going to have about emotions. Next week, we're talking about anger, and Justin LaRosa will be here to talk about it with us. The week after that will be anxiety, and we'll have one of the youth here, and I'll be talking to them about that in a Beyond the Sermon capacity too, to understand what youth are dealing with, to process anxiety or to remove sources of anxiety from their own lives.
And if you're with Craigslist, no defamation intended. We would love for you to be a sponsor of Beyond the Sermon.
Yes, sponsored by Craigslist. We'll see you next time.